السلام علیکم ناظرین، آپ دیکھ رہے ہیں پروگرام زاویہ MM5 نیوز پر. میرا نام فہد ہے. ناظرین، جیسا کہ آپ جانتے ہیں کہ مئی 6 کو برطانیہ بھر میں الیکشنز ہو رہے ہیں. اس میں لنڈن میئر کے الیکشنز ہو رہے ہیں, لوکل کاؤنسلز کے الیکشن ہو رہے ہیں, اس کے ساتھ ساتھ اسکاٹش پارلیمنٹ اور ویلش پارلیمنٹ کے بھی جو ہے وہ الیکشنز ہو رہے ہیں. ناظرین, MM5 نیوز کی کوشش رہی ہے کہ ان دا رن اپ ٹو دا مئی 6 الیکشنز آپ کی ملاقات کرائی جائے, ہماری جو کنورسیشنز ہیں ڈفرنٹ پالیٹیشینز کے ساتھ. آج وی آر آنرڈ ٹو ہیو میئر رخسانہ فیاض ود us, OB, the first directly elected female mayor of Newham. Thank you so much, Ruksanah, for joining us today. How is the election campaign going?
It's going well. I mean, as you would imagine, it's a very different type of local election campaign from previous years and what we're used to, because we're having to be very mindful about COVID-19 and the ongoing risks that presents to our communities, particularly here in Newham, where for a period of time last year, once the pandemic sort of commenced here in the UK, we were very much at the highest levels here in England with regards to mortality case rate. So we're having to be careful, but you know, the team, the Newham Labour team here in the borough is very much doing as much as it can in a very safe way to advocate for our Labour candidates for both the Mayor of London election, so Sadiq Khan. If you're a Labour supporter, even if you're not, please vote Sadiq, if I'm allowed to say that. Apologies, Fahad. But also we have our representatives for the Greater London Assembly, which is located in City Hall, and presently City Hall is by Tower Bridge near the centre of London, but it's going to be moving here to Newham later in the year. So we have two candidates from the local area that are standing to be elected. Umesh Desai, who's presently an assembly member, and also a cabinet member of mine, James Beckles, who's looking at being selected as an assembly member for next Thursday's election. So it's a frenzy of campaigning as well as getting on with the job and the privilege of being the mayor of Newham.
Okay, so Ruksanah, tell us, obviously you became a councillor in 2014 and then you became the first directly elected female mayor of Newham in 2018. But tell us a little bit about your journey into politics, like what inspired you to get into electoral politics, running for office, and what sort of drove that decision?
So, you know, there's always been an overlay of political consciousness as far back as I can remember. Grew up in a very politicized or politically conscious or aware household. My parents are actually from Pakistan, and my father arrived here in the UK in the early 1960s, soon followed by my mother. And as I was growing up, there was lots of conversation about the ongoing situation in the Indian subcontinent, having, achieved independence through partition, the issues of how those nascent infant countries were emerging and trying to stabilize, and, the consequent impact around, the various stages of conflict, and what was happening with regards to the Pakistan nation state, and the various issues pertaining to good governance. And so it was very much a conversation that my mother and father would have around the kitchen table as I was growing up, and it just laid in me a sense that politics was important. And also growing up in 1970s England as a child, it was a very, very hostile environment in a different, albeit similar way to some of the hostile environment issues that we're still grappling and contending with and campaigning against. So my parents, as being, members of that first generation of immigrants that came from Pakistan and the wider Indian subcontinent, very much experienced racism, and that is something that has informed my politics. So my journey has always had an overlay of anti-racism work, campaigning for social justice, as much informed also by my faith, having been brought up in a Muslim household and being a Muslim myself, what is instilled in you around social justice and making sure that you're helping the needy and the vulnerable and contributing to society. So all those things, mixing together very much, informed my thinking, my politics, and it's just carried on ever since. And I was approached to become a councillor back in 2014, and I was a representative for a local area in Newham called Custom House, which is amongst the most deprived here in this borough. And, it very much solidified my thinking around the need to undertake a moral crusade against poverty and inequality, because the depths of deprivation were so acute, and it baffled and upset me that I was here, a Labour councillor, part of a Labour administration, yet I didn't feel and didn't believe that enough was being done to tackle poverty and inequality, particularly as it was experienced by ethnic minority communities here in the borough. We have the largest number of ethnic minorities here in Newham. 78% of our resident population is from the ethnic minority communities. We have 240 languages, dialects spoken. We literally have a connection to every single part of the world. And yet we have those communities, or from those communities, significant levels of poverty, income inequality, bad housing, and that just didn't feel right to me. So I felt compelled to put myself forward and stand up in challenge against my predecessor. And I feel very privileged that the local Labour Party membership endorsed my candidature to become the official Labour Party representative for the Mayor of Newham, and then subsequently the endorsement of the Newham population. I think I achieved 73% of all the votes cast back in May 2018, and I am currently serving a 4-year term. You're right, I'm the first female directly elected mayor in London, but I'm also the first female directly elected mayor of colour anywhere in the country, here in the UK, but also in Europe. So it's a real privilege, and I feel that I am providing a role model opportunity for many other women, but also young men from the diaspora that I come from, but also all young people of colour, because we need role models to look up to aspire. And I've always, looked up to other leading figures from the ethnic minority communities and their giants whose shoulders I stand on, because they encouraged me, even at a distance. You should always try to strive to be your best, ensure that you demonstrate your contribution and giving back to humanity, and that you're part of a global movement to try to, create a better world for everyone.
Absolutely, and obviously you've broken quite a few glass ceiling yourselves. Looking back at your career, obviously got elected as a councillor in 2014 and a mayor since 2018. What would you say the highs and lows have been when you look back at your career in politics?
It's really hard to say. I mean, at every single step of this journey so far, there have been many exhilarating moments, from being involved in the Stephen Lawrence family justice campaign. At the time, I was working for a national anti-racist movement, and the family needed to support to galvanize it into a national campaign that required absolutely the attention of the national media and of national government. And meeting through that process and many others, some incredible people. So Dr. Richard Stone, a doctor of note who used to work in West London, very familiar and very much at the front line of the experience of the Black community in that part of London. So that would have been the Notting Hill area. Became a mentor. He was an advisor on the Stephen Lawrence examination or inquiry led by Lord Macpherson. And meeting individuals such as Dr. Richard Stone and many others informed my thinking about what the requirements of a leader need to be. And they taught me the importance of humility, of authenticity, of integrity, and of ensuring that you have a moral compass very much anchored in everything that you do when you step into public life. It is really important in this age where too many people feel let down and disappointed and disillusioned with politics and politicians, that we develop a new generation of politicians that absolutely are focused in delivering for people. And that's what I feel particularly proud of, that I've had the benefit of meeting some really incredible people who have maintained in me the focus on that moral compass and integrity in public life.
And we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming election. So May 6th, obviously you mentioned Sadiq Khan's up for re-election, and then we've got, in terms of Labour Party, we've got Anas Sarwar leading Labour Party in Scotland. So what would you say Labour's message is? Obviously with Sadiq Khan, all the polls are suggesting that he will hopefully comfortably win a second term. But when we look at Labour's performance generally in the polling that is coming out, despite Conservatives being in power for the last good part of 11 years, Labour still trailing behind quite a lot. So what would you say Labour's message is for 6th of May, and what should people be thinking about?
Simply put, Labour's message to this country is a message of hope against the backdrop of the devastation that has been caused by the most serious public health crisis that has faced this country, but also humanity globally. We have a situation here in London where the economic impact of COVID-19 will be significant and huge for thousands and thousands of Londoners. And if you love London, vote for London by voting for Sadiq Khan. And please do not be complacent. There is no guarantee that, it's a shoo-in for the Labour candidate Sadiq Khan. He's brilliant, he's amazing, he will advocate for Londoners, and he has been absolutely on point in his advocacy for London in the face of a Tory government that has systematically stripped London of the revenue and the income that it needs to serve Londoners. So, for example, in the midst of a pandemic last year, the government announced that it was going to remove funding so that young people no longer were in receipt of free travel passes. That's because they claimed that Transport for London needed to reshore its financial position. COVID-19 clearly had an impact, as it has had on all sections of the economy. It had an impact on transport, travel, on the London Underground, because people were required due and through the lockdown phases to stay at home. The transport network in London is the only major transport network anywhere in the world that does not receive central government funding. All of it has to be generated through ticket sales. Yet we have some of the most deprived communities in London. We have within those deprived communities young people growing up with the